Donald J. Trump is the next president of the United States. But until January 20th, he is only president-elect. He is not the actual president. The sitting president is still going to be Joe Biden for the next 2 months or so, 2.5 months or so. And something that we've seen, for example, from Obama's last few months, it it took a very different direction when it comes to Israel, or maybe not different, but a much worse direction when it comes to Israel. And some people are currently worried that something similar, we might see something similar when it comes to Joe Biden. So today we'll talk about some of the worries that Netanyahu and some officials in the Israel have about what might be happening now for the next few months, because it is going to be a very uncertain era. For example, just to bring up one different example, Iran has said that they are planning attack against Israel, but they've also said they will wait until after the election, to not interfere in the American election process. I'm really glad they have at least principles on that. And then now after it, I've seen different reports on that. Um, so this can go many different ways. So we will definitely be talking about that. Joining me today is Michael and Anders. Hey guys.
Hello.
And welcome to the reality show. So let me start with Michael, since he hasn't been on yesterday, and I think at least he is pretty happy about Trump's win. I'm a bit more mixed, but at least on Israel, it's definitely going to be positive. So Michael, maybe if you want to say anything on Trump's victory, and then how do you think the next few months are looking when it comes to Biden's policy on Israel?
Yeah. Um, Look, I don't know. No rational person that I know actually likes Donald Trump. I mean, he's not a likable guy. He says a lot of things he shouldn't, and he behaves in a way that's somewhat conduct unbecoming, certainly a president of the free world. That said, the man basically ran on a few very simple notions. One, if you want to reduce crime, you don't defund the police. Number two, if you want to be a country, you have to have a border. Number three, anti-Semitism is basically criminal and not to be accepted. And certainly shouting death to Israel, death to America in Donald Trump's book is as close to, treasonous or it is really bad. Let's just put it that way as you could be. Girls should not, and boys should not be playing girls' sports, and simple concepts like, and criminals should be locked up. There isn't a lot frankly, other than his abortion stance, which I am 180 degrees diametrically opposed to, meaning get the politicians out of a woman's body and her situation. I agree with most of his policies, and I don't think he's a terribly religious guy, despite the fact that he professes to be. So I think if you look at his actions from his first time, I can tell you, America was a much stronger place. It was a much less divided place. We certainly had all the whining and all the kids, with their safe parts and colleges and everything. But we didn't have the behavioral problems that we do today. We didn't have the crime that we do today. We don't have homeless people. We didn't have homeless people in all of our major cities pooping all over, leaving needles all over, and politicians pretending there was nothing they could do about it. And we certainly had a lot more law and order. Which, by the way, we have in Florida and Texas. When there's anti-Semitism and pro-Hamas movements in Florida and Texas, the governors of those states have taken care of it because it's perfectly legal to take care of it. It's just about having the will to do so. I am very happy. I think I'm frankly happier that the message to the Democratic Party has to be, and especially because it looks like the House is going to go Republican as well. So this will be a complete sweep. It's a repudiation of pretty much everything they stood for, and there will be a turnaround. I'll just close with saying I don't think that Biden has the interest, or frankly, he will get the advice to do things that'll piss Trump off more. Because I think people will say, well, Donald Trump is very vindictive. He's a bit childish. And if if the Democrats go too far in one direction, he will counter it with a push in the other direction that would be worse than what he's planning to do anyway, or worse in the Democrats' playbook. And just today, you know, I think 25 F-15 fighter jets were delivered to Israel. There was a little more money approved. I just don't see it happening, that there's going to be a crush on Israel. And I think if the UN, if there is a stupid move like Obama did at the UN, Donald Trump wants every reason to shut down funding of as many parts of the UN, if not the whole thing, as possible. And I think that would only exacerbate the situation.
Yeah, although I don't necessarily agree with everything you've said. We have 4 years to talk about Trump, so today I just want to focus more on specifically, well, for one, Biden's possible policy in the next few months, and also Trump's, because I think he even said that as soon as he gets elected, he will start basically discussing different things. I think he said he will start doing some type of negotiation between, for example, Ukraine and Russia on day one of like him actually being elected, not even like actually being in office. I just wanna bring in some context for basically what Obama did, just so we know. Basically, in his final days in office, he took an unusual step by basically there was a vote in the UN Security Council, and America basically abstained, allowing a resolution against Jewish settlements to pass, which later allowed for a lot of basically sanctions against the settlements. And again, he did in the last few days of his presidency. Anders, what do you think? What are we in for when it comes to Biden in the next few months?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, obviously, but I would be surprised if something radical or vindictive happens. I think it's more a question of what the people behind Biden would do than Biden himself, because I mean he seems rather gone at this point, and we know that in both the State Department, primarily in the State Department, there are quite a few pro-Hamas and pro-Hezbollah people, and yeah, maybe some of them would go rogue here in the last couple of months, but I would be very surprised. And even if they did, I don't know how much of an impact it would have. Now, I'm not as positive when it comes to Trump as I think Michael might be. I had my least bad scenario coming out of this election would have been a divided government in one shape or form, because I think in the next 4 years, the less that is done, the better off we will be. We'll see how that plays out. But if I would have a wish list for Trump's first days in office when it comes to Israel, you know, I would love, and this is, I mean, this is again wishful thinking. I would love a repeat of Reagan's freeing the hostages in Iran, you know, as soon as he took office, and maybe on January 21st, we have a massive bombing campaign of Iran to take them out once and for all. And quite frankly, if that would happen, then Israel wouldn't have, there would be some mopping up of Hamas and Hezbollah and then the Houthis, but their lifelines would be cut off and they would be neutered basically. So that would be my super duper scenario, but I'm pretty sure that won't happen.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about the Israel sort of Gaza policy, Lebanon, and Iran. Just to to bring in something that we might possibly see, or at least this is what the worries are about, is that Biden might push stronger for the deal. For example, for withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor, for a diplomatic solution between Lebanon and Israel, or rather Hezbollah and Israel, which I think is something that even Netanyahu was sort of pointing towards, not necessarily being against that. I know Hezbollah has been also sort of pointing towards that, basically saying, or at least, the most recent iteration of a new Secretary General has pretty much gave up on the idea of conditioning the peace deal on the Gaza peace deal, basically tying it together, because that was the policy of Nasrallah, basically saying, I will not even negotiate with you unless there is a ceasefire in Gaza. They sort of gave up on that. So we might see something something sooner when it comes to Lebanon. Another reason why we might see it is because at least now that seems to be also Trump's preferred policy. I think he has been talking about he's been saying different things, but he definitely has said, I think I have even a specific quote, maybe not. He said that he basically wants a peace in Lebanon. So and definitely we'll see communication between Netanyahu and Trump even before he fully comes into office. So we might actually see some deal between Hezbollah and Israel soon, which would definitely be unfortunate thing to see from the perspective of Hezbollah surviving in any capability at all. Although there were talks about Hezbollah basically getting dismantled, and finally the Lebanese army sort of taking control of the south, which would still be better solution than nothing. But if Hezbollah survives this in any capabilities, I think this would be definitely still problematic. Something I kind of want to bring up, and I'm wondering what you guys think, because I've seen this report basically a few months ago, when there was a discussion about basically that Trump might become a president, and what this would mean when it comes to sort of the way Netanyahu acts. We've seen some problems between Trump and Netanyahu. Some really unkind words have been said, but also we've seen, I think Netanyahu has pretty much acknowledged that Trump is the best thing that sort of Israel can have in the White House. But some people were worried about, basically, with Biden, Harris in office, Netanyahu has this sort of basically a scapegoat. If something goes wrong, look, they don't allow me to do anything. I cannot, they have problems with me going into Rafah. They have problems with me attacking Iranian oil fields and nuclear sites. And he had a certain amount of basically, blaming someone else, which he most likely will not be able to do with Trump. He won't be able to say, hey, Trump is saying I cannot, pursue military actions, that this will not work. I'm wondering, Michael, what do you think about this idea?
Yeah, look, I think action-wise, I'm not sure it really makes a lot of difference. I do think it's really important for people to remember that the way Israel carried out the initial stages of the Gaza campaign was actually very, very limited and very localized, and made to this day no article that I have read has given a good military reason why anybody would go into the north, knowing full well that the people were going to move to the center and then go into the center and then sequentially go to the south, when the Israeli army, once it was mobilized, could easily have attacked. And I am well aware that there were plans to actually go in on three fronts at once, to attack it all at once, and which was thought to be the most likely way to get the hostages back, because the chaos that would have caused, and it would have prevented. Now, I understand, again, this isn't from anybody official, but it's from talking to a lot of people in Israel, including, people that were involved, that it was the U.S. who said, no, you can't do that because there'll be too many civilians hurt. So what we have is we have 101 hostages left in Gaza, including 7 or 8 Americans, and you have people just running around through the tunnels. And you have Israel sort of doing these pinpoint things where, it's the Obama baloney of of if there's a civilian anywhere nearby, you have to get 5 layers of approval before you're even allowed to fire a bullet. I mean, it's crazy. It's a crazy way to conduct a war, and probably a lot more innocent people have died. I think Trump actually said that already, that when you constrain this kind of situation, the war just is prolonged and more innocent people die. I don't know that from an action point of view, it's going to matter much. I think Netanyahu, after he visited the U.S. last, and when he went in front of Congress, and Kamala Harris did not attend that session, which for anybody looking at this is about the biggest slight you could give to a world leader. And it was a very strong message that many American Jews chose to ignore. He came back, and that's when we Israel started to fight the war in Lebanon. That's when the gloves came off. This baloney about we're having targeted, localized raids in Lebanon it's in every press release that the IDF puts out. It doesn't exist. Today there was additional attacks by Israel north of the Litani River, which is north of the UN resolution line, and it's in the northern part. There were attacks on Beirut right next to the runway because we had a missile hit very close to Ben Gurion Airport, actually hit a parking lot in Tel Aviv, so to the Tel Aviv airport. So we reprised by, of course, a near hit. But my point is that what's going on in Lebanon is decimating Lebanon. This isn't some kind of localized, strategic, surgical attack. This southern Lebanon is gone. I mean, a lot of it is destroyed. Certainly anywhere Hezbollah is destroyed. Now northern Lebanon is starting to get hit. And there was also that wonderful kidnapping of one of the, I think it was a Hezbollah or an IRGC member, but I think it's Hezbollah, way north, close to Tripoli, in the north of Lebanon, close to the Syrian border, that Israel carried out. So there is free reign now, Israel has, and they are going to continue to decimate Hezbollah. I don't think Netanyahu is looking for a scapegoat to blame anymore. I think that the people in Israel, he is riding a wave of popularity. The people in Israel are getting sick and tired of this. They want to see this thing finished. They want to stop seeing missiles. They want the people in the north to go back home. And I think Trump, from a lot of his statements, and he recently had one of his GOP spokespeople said, total victory. Now, I don't know if total victory in Lebanon means complete eradication of Hezbollah. It probably doesn't, because it's a military and a civilian problem there. But I do think he means that Trump will help Netanyahu get the job done.
So I definitely want to talk about I think it was a decisive victory quote, as you said, from the spokesperson. And that came out after Trump was already elected. So campaign is over. Now, I hope all these things are, not just for campaign, but actually, some promises or some actions that will be taken. But before I go to that, Anders, just quickly, what do you think about sort of Netanyahu's, maybe if his view of how much his view of the White House will change, and basically, is he now losing a really easy scapegoat when it comes to sort of blame?
Yeah, I think I'm with Michael here. I don't know that that factors much into the equation. And as Michael mentioned, after Netanyahu's last visit here to the U.S., that's when Israel really started to take care of business, if you like. And I mean, I think Biden sent a message to Iran here a week or so ago that we can't control Israel, or to that effect, which I thought was interesting.
Just to bring context, because I think basically the scenario was there was a talk about Iran possibly attacking Israel again,
Exactly.
and basically, hey,
Yeah.
Biden said that we might not be able to hold them off now.
Exactly. So I thought that was interesting, and I would, as a minimum, hope that Trump is giving Israel free reins, and then, but hopefully more than that. So, and when it comes to Lebanon and Gaza as well, and the West Bank for that matter, I mean, there are very few people, I think, or at least that I've read, that are talking about the end game here. It's almost like people want to avoid that discussion completely, because as I see it, there is really no other way towards a lasting peace than just having Israel, if not occupy, but at least rule these areas for the foreseeable future. I know the Israelis don't want to do this, but I mean, in their own self-interest, what else can you do? Because as soon we see it with UNRWA and UNIFIL, is that the troops in southern Lebanon. As soon as you bring the UN in, you know, it turns into a real mess. And a League of Arab Nations or Middle Eastern nations, I mean, that would never work. So, and I don't actually want the US to get troops underground and get involved in quote unquote nation building here. But I can't see any other solution that is in Israel's self-interest towards a lasting peace than to really rule these areas for the foreseeable future. But I'd be interested in your view of that, Michael.
Well,
No, I think the so-called two-state solution is absurd. There's no other state on the other side. There's no leader on the other side except for terrorist leaders. And you're right. I mean, the only other thing that I've seen floated is this nebulous thing where the U.S. kind of oversees an international force, which might include UAE or Bahrain or one of them, or even Saudi Arabia sending in some soldiers. But Israel's going to need to maintain, for sure. Israel's going to maintain. I think one quick geographic point to everybody. The Philadelphia corridor is not some nebulous corridor, folks. It's the border between Israel and Gaza and Egypt. Okay, this notion that Israel should ever, after what has happened after October 7th, the notion that Israel should ever trust anyone to guard that corridor, which is where all of the weapons came in and all of the supplies to build the terror tunnels through Egypt, which is in a peace treaty or a mutual recognition treaty with Israel. So they violated, if not the letter of that treaty, I certainly didn't read it, but at least the spirit of it is Egypt laughed at it. And these are billions of dollars worth of materials and weapons that came through the Philadelphia corridor. This is not, as the news would like to have you, just Israel being stubborn. This is literally an existential problem for Israel about rearming Gaza. So Israel's going to have to maintain a serious presence on the border, and they certainly will after the October 7th border fiasco that Israel managed. But I agree, and I agree with you. I don't want to see a lot of U.S. people in there, but I think the U.S. is the only one. I mean, Western Europe has no real leadership now, at least not in the strong sense of the word. And the UN, of course, is the most corrupt one of the most corrupt anti-Semitic organizations around. So you're really left with, you know, can you get the U.S. to oversee something? Israel will need to monitor carefully, but hopefully it doesn't require a ton of Israeli folks. And then what to do with the people to govern? You know, I don't know if there are even leaders, to be blunt, in the Arab world that want to take over an area and try to make it a prosperous, semi-capitalistic, semi-democratic, you know, less bribery. I don't know. I agree with you. It just not. You need leadership.
Well, there were different talks when it comes to Gaza. I think one that I've heard a long time ago was basically Gaza becoming the part of the United Arab Emirates and sort of like, basically becoming part of that. I think there was also some talks about maybe the Saudis like taking over the civilian control. We'll see. We'll definitely have to see where this goes. Something, you know, when it comes to post-war Gaza, as Anders talked about, no one really talks about that. Even when it comes to Netanyahu, I think the only sort of axiom we had in this was the Philadelphia corridor, which I think is definitely a good start. Basically saying that Philadelphia corridor, Israel will keep control, and he will not bend on that. That is sort of a red line. it's a very good start. It should definitely be a red line, but definitely I think an occupation is the only way forward. I don't see anything different that could happen here. And even when it comes to, some different Arabic nation taking over the civilian parts, you always have to remember, even Arab nations are afraid of the Palestinians. They are really crazy and radicalized. No one really wants to, just take care of them. So that they've become crazy, like actually, like so radicalized against Israel that yeah, it's even not even when it comes to like a civilian control, it's going to be problematic when it comes to sort of what we might see from Trump. So as Michael said, the spokesperson for Trump, and I think yesterday, has said that I think she was asked about if Trump wants peace in the Middle East, and the answer was something like Trump does want peace, but through a decisive victory. And that was an important part, that basically if there is any peace to be done, it needs to be basically from, in this case, I think Hamas losing. So at least on this front, I think we should see something good. But still, sort of the way Trump has been speaking is that he wants to keep that sort of a title of not starting new wars, or there has been peace under Trump. So he wants peace. He wants quick peace. And some of his rhetoric was good. He was criticizing Biden's sort of back and forth support of Israel. Basically, yeah, you can defend yourself, but not too much. So Trump has pretty much committed to full-on support of Israel, or basically just not stopping Israel from defending itself. So at least on this front, Israel should be in much better position. We'll have to see if Netanyahu will commit fully to basically, yeah, finishing this war and also drawing up a plan for the post-war Gaza. We had one person who always wanted to speak about post-war Gaza and sort of giving it back to the Palestinian Authority, but Yoav Gallant has been fired, so he's no longer, his voice is no longer really that relevant here. Basically, he has been someone who has insisted on Israel not reoccupying Gaza. So with him gone, we might see it, but as I'm not sure who of you said, Israelis generally do not really want to see another occupation of Gaza. So if it's to be done, it will definitely be something that will be hard to sort of balance, basically what Israelis want and also what is the actual proper solution when it comes to post-war Gaza. Michael, anything you want to say before we move on to Iran?
Yeah, when you say that the Palestinians are nobody wants them, I mean, again, look at actions. Talk is so cheap, right? No one has wanted to take any of the Palestinians during this war. All of this whining about humanitarian aid and all the destitute conditions and so on and so forth. And I'm saying it cynically because put your actions where your mouth is. If you're so worried about it, these countries, Egypt has plenty of room. They don't have much of an economy, but they have plenty of room. Jordan has plenty of room. A lot of the Palestinians were really Jordanians to start off. It doesn't really matter. There's plenty of room in the Arab lands, which are much, much bigger land spaces than Israel is. And you could accept them. And not a single one has reached out to accept the Palestinians. And part of it is because UNRWA officially schools these kids in how to kill people. That's what they're mostly learning. They're not learning STEM. And if we're all going to solve any of these problems, or at least get, at least elect policymakers that will solve them, we better start telling the truth and stop with this baloney that we keep hearing about. Nobody wants the Palestinians because they're a bunch of crazy people who don't know how to live in a productive society. And one last point on that. When you see pictures of Gaza, you'll notice there are no women around, unless there's a made-up, picture of a woman and a kid getting killed. And if you watch carefully, half the time in those pictures, they suddenly come back to life because there's actually a siren going off. And that tells you this is not a society that anybody wants. And we have to be honest about that. I don't know, there are many people in the State Department in the US and elsewhere who know a lot more about what potential leaders who are living outside of Gaza, who could come in, or outside the Palestinian Authority, could come in and govern. And if they could govern with the protection, at least the initial protection of Israeli security services and so on, maybe they could start to form a country. You know, Japan did it after World War II. They completely upended their emperor-based culture and they replaced it with what is now effectively a democracy, as far as I'm aware. Same with Germany. You know, the entire Third Reich was pretty much either in the Nuremberg trials or dead, or running to Argentina and other places. And they came up with leaders who would take over and build a society that wanted to be part of the civilized world. So surely there might be somebody, maybe it's a more, you know, quiet Arab area that could come in and do it. I don't know.
Well, just quickly, a big problem with that is there has to be, you know, the leader has to also have the sort of the confidence of the people. And the fact is, the Palestinians really do not want peace with Israel. So any sort of like leader that could be sort of this civilian, you know, civilian style government, you know, trying to promote more freedom, trying to promote individual rights, that person is fundamentally not someone Palestinians want. So that's, I think, the big problem that
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm not that. Yeah, just to quickly say, I'm not suggesting that someone come in there and try to teach people about democracy. You know, America had their heads up their butts when we try to do it in Afghanistan, and we try to do it in Vietnam and Korea as well. That doesn't work. But establishing a productive and economically productive culture, one that instead of building a terror tunnel and putting together IEDs, is actually trying to make products, create something. Open a beach. They have gorgeous beaches there. Clean it up, open it up, and start to bring in a little bit of internal tourism. And then maybe eventually some other people would come in and actually start something and clean up the crime that goes on there, which is never talked about. You got to start economically. I think you got to show people that there is a path to a better life. And it's not by telling them we should all be free thinkers and you need to go to college now and learn about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's by getting people to focus their energies on doing constructive things, not destructive things.
Yeah, I think the big difference when it comes to Germany and Japan is the fact that those countries and the people were devastated. They've basically experienced the end of the world, and they had no other choice than, yeah, completely give up on that philosophy that they have been pursuing for a long time. But that unfortunately hasn't been the case when it comes to Gaza. It was long and slow, and I don't think that's something I've been talking about for months. There simply wasn't this like devastating sort of realization that you have to choose a different way. So something I'm really afraid is, you know, maybe some Israeli occupation, but it will not be that strong. The sort of the Palestinian resistance against Israel and philosophy against Israel will basically persevere until Israel again decides to basically pull out from the area. So that's something I'm really worried about when it comes to specific to Gaza. Basically just seeing the repetition of post-67 until the disengagement. But Anders, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree that I think that's a realistic assessment that, you know, Israel will muddle along here and yeah, stay engaged for a while until they think that the immediate threat is gone, and then maybe go home and then he'll start all over again. But to your point, Michael, with, you know, finding someone who could come in, and by the way, I think, Daniel, that yes, Palestinians don't want peace. I suspect that there is a growing share of people who are really tired of Hamas in Gaza and of Hezbollah in Lebanon. I mean, we've seen pictures of people celebrating in the streets when Hezbollah was attacked by Israel. So there are people like that. Now, has that ultimate defeat been experienced yet? Perhaps not, but man, it can't be fun to live in Gaza right now. Uh, so from that point of view, but still, even if you can find those internal leaders, I don't see how anybody other than Israel itself can maintain peace in these areas. And again, because I hate to see the U.S. get involved, because as you mentioned, Michael, we have failed at that over and over again. And then, quite frankly, I don't know that that is in our self-interest, which should be the ultimate decider of whether we should get involved or not. I mean, I think it definitely is in our self-interest to take out Iran. And that would obviously make it a lot easier for Israel to do what it needs to do at home and in these bordering areas.
Yeah, so good that you mentioned it. Let's actually move on to Iran and what we might see. I maybe you guys think different, but I don't think we'll see pretty much anything from Biden. I'd be surprised if any either positive or negative sort of action have been taken. I think it will be much more interesting to talk about when Trump comes into office. At least from my understanding, he pretty much I think he opposed any sort of regime change in Iran or even any sort of direct actions against Iran. But he definitely said Israel should do something, especially when it was attacked. It should have attacked the nuclear sites, should have attacked the oil sites. So he definitely supported it in that way. The problem, or the sort of problem that I think comes from the Israeli side, is that I don't think we'll see anything proactive against Iran, despite the threat I think Iran poses, especially when it comes to possible nuclear weapons. Once they have those, we are moving into much different stage of sort of the dynamics we have. And there are different reports that Iran might develop it soon, although there have been reports about Iran developing nuclear weapons soon for some time. So it's hard to say when exactly it could happen. We might not even see, as I've said, there was a possible attack coming from Iran after the election. We might not see something just based on the fact that, now that Trump is in office, Iran might be just much more scared to do anything against Israel. But from a long-term perspective, action against Iran has to be taken, especially when it comes to developing of nuclear weapons. And that's something I'm really worried about, because if Iran doesn't do any aggression towards Israel or America, and it will just silently keep developing nuclear weapons, I think they will just, similar to sort of North Korea, they will develop them and no action will be taken against them unless they do something. Michael, what do you think?
I'm in complete agreement with you. I mean, this is a little bit like the weather, as Oscar Wilde likes to say. Everybody talks about it and nobody does anything about it. The Obama deal was absurd. The fact that they lied throughout the Obama deal, and shock, the International Atomic Energy Commission, which we're all supposed to put our faith in, was duped. Boy, that's a real shock. I mean, these are not Elon Musk disciples who are the best at the best, right? These are bureaucrats who frankly want to get along with the people they're investigating, which is exactly the wrong thing to do. The notion that you can negotiate with people that are religious zealots who would rather meet Allah and get their virgins is you have to be a complete idiot, or you just have to be willfully naive. And that's basically what the Obama policy said. Let's try to do a deal with these crazy people who shout death to America, death to the great Satan, and pretend that it's actually going to stem anything. Also, that we don't go in there and bomb the heck out of them. Now, I want to add one more thing, and that is, we've been told by the press, especially, the amazing liberal press in the US, that all supported Harris and told us she was going to win. We've been told by them that Iran has 600,000 soldier army or whatever, and they have this and they have that and they have the other thing. Somehow, little Israel, which is 1/5, I don't know how many, it's tiny compared to Iran, Little Israel sent 140 planes on a mission 1,000 miles away in Iran and took out essentially all of the air defenses around Tehran. Iran is now naked. The reason Iran hasn't done anything, especially after Biden said, I don't think I can restrain Israel, is because Iran will be decimated. Tehran will be decimated. Whether it's the oil or the government buildings or the nuclear or all of them, there is no protection around Iran and Tehran right now. Little Israel did this on one bombing run, which lasted, I think, 5 or 6 hours maximum for what I heard, from what I've been able to glean, because it's hard to get the exact number. This is one bombing run, folks. You don't think the U.S. Air Force with aircraft carriers surrounding Iran and all of our stealth technology, and by the way, the same planes that Israel used, because they're all American planes, could go in there and take out Iran if we had the political will to do it?
Well, just quickly, not even the same planes. Israel has pretty old planes when those are American, but I think like pretty old.
They're old American, but yeah. I will say that what I've been told from the intelligence is they're a bit enhanced for Israel, but it's fine. Yes, and ours, I'm sure, are even better than what they're getting. This is all political will and leadership. And this is a democratic Obama-esque policy after the great failures in Afghanistan and in Iraq, that America decided we're going to be hands off, and you know what? We're going to pretend that Iran is going to behave nicely. Last point is that this same attitude with Obama, with this Obama/Biden-Harris behavior, is why Anthony Blinken, one of the worst secretaries of state in the history of America, was running back and forth talking about a ceasefire with terrorists. And then being, and I've said before on the show, and then quoted as being surprised that the terrorists are not negotiating in good faith. This whole statement from a senior person in the United States government that they're shocked that a terrorist is not negotiating in good faith is exactly what's wrong with the philosophy of the current US government. Terrorists are not like Americans and Westerners and Israelis. They are evil people who, as you said, Anders, they don't mind if everybody dies. And we have to change our understanding of this. Israel understands this. America and the West do not understand how bad these folks are. You are right to be worried about Iran unless we get some real leadership in action.
Yeah, I think this comes from sort of, I think this American naivete comes from the good things about Americans. It's it's really hard to imagine someone who doesn't want to live a prosperous life. It's really hard to imagine someone who would rather see the good things burned down than your own people sort of rise up and live in a better system. So the negotiations, even when you talk about the nuclear deal or the Obama deal, about it was sort of, well, they will commit to not developing nuclear weapons, which we want, and they'll develop their energy alternatives to energy. So why would they not want this? Why would they not want to become a more prosperous nation as opposed to just trying to destroy someone else? It's I think it comes from the sort of the good parts about America, the benevolence. But when it comes to foreign policy, you have to realize, some people with much different philosophies would rather see America burn than Iran prosper, and that's something that we have to realize before we have any proper response to Iran. But Anders, what do you think? Do you think we'll see anything big when it comes to Iran in the rest of Biden's presidency? And do you think then afterwards, when Trump takes over, do you think we'll see any direct actions against Iran, specifically the nuclear sites?
Well, the short answer is that I don't know. But I would be surprised, as I said before, to see anything radical happening in the next couple of months before Trump takes office. After that, your guess is as good as mine. Yeah, because we're dealing with Trump here. And on the one hand, I mean, as a minimum, unconditional moral support of what Israel needs to do would be a step in the right direction. and also, as I mentioned before, you know, the kind of dream scenario would be a joint attack on Iran early on in the Trump administration. But on the other hand, we also know that Trump prides himself for being the great negotiator and the deal maker, you know, and I wouldn't be surprised if he is taking a similar tack on Iran as he has taken on North Korea, you know. Yeah, well, maybe I should go and negotiate with these guys, strong man to strong man, or something like that. So, you know, that's the thing with Trump. We're talking about an emotional pragmatist here, and who knows what comes into his head in the first few months of his administration. And then, of course, we can hope that he will have some good people behind him that will influence him in the right direction. But I don't know if the conservatives, when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to military engagement, I mean, supposedly the neoconservatives are out of fashion, but I don't know if the just war theory has been abandoned, for instance. I think that is very deeply ingrained in both our military and our State Department these days. So I you know, I want to be positive, but I'm not sure how much ground there is for that.
Yeah, I think, as you said, neoconservatism is pretty much dead when it comes to, having any influence in the Republican Party, or I think even broader conservative movement. The new trend is isolationism, and basically not engaging with the rest of the world, which in some sense there are good qualities. Not wanting to intervene in every single conflict around the world is probably preferable than being in every single conflict around the world, but also not recognizing the fact that Russia is the enemy, the fact that Iran is the enemy, and that currently maybe, Russia is even direct enemy. They have been helping the Houthis attack the international shipping, so you cannot even make a case that they are just sort of a proxy enemy. But there needs to be a recognition that actions against Iran are not this neocon, we want to build a new nation. If the Iranians wanna stand up against Iran and do something about it, they should definitely be supported 100%. But the main reason for action against Iran is American self-interest. The fact that Iran has been the enemy of the United States, if there was a recognition, has been at war with the United States pretty much since its founding. Unless we see some action there, again, that's might be the problematic part of the Trump's foreign policy. So I have just one thing more to bring up as just sort of like an interesting thing. Something that we might see, and also a funny thing, something that we might see different is, of course, now for a long time, the ICC has been preparing a case, or basically trying to get a warrant out for the arrest of Netanyahu as a war criminal, because defending your own nation is a war crime now, and something that Biden did do or didn't do, depends on how you take. He basically blocked any sanctions against ICC, even if it were to happen. Now with Trump in office, I don't think he would have any problem with sanctions against the ICC if the warrant for Netanyahu were actually put out. And if something like that would happen, we might actually see my favorite policy. My favorite American law that has been passed by George Bush. It's the American Service Members Protection Act, or as it's now called, the Hague Invasion Act, because basically it allows the American president to take action against the International Criminal Court. The original purpose was basically because I think there were talks about putting an arrest warrant for George Bush as a war criminal. So this was passed, so it would allow to basically do any actions. But as part of this law, it doesn't apply only to the U.S. politicians, but it also applies to allies. So if there was an warrant for Netanyahu, and if he were to arrest it, the president could take actions without the approval of Congress even. It would definitely be a weird scenario, because all those nations that would support, or basically the nations that would potentially arrest Netanyahu, are part of NATO. So there will be a really weird scenario, which I'd be surprised if we actually get to, but it's still something interesting to talk about. Michael, what do you think about this? And if not, any last words?
Look, I think any of these organizations, you have to, like anything else, you have to have continuous assessment of whether they're legitimate and whether they're helpful. Obviously, the ICC is illegitimate. I mean, you can't selectively go after a country with a democratically elected person, even if I don't like Netanyahu, but it doesn't matter. He was elected by the populace, and he represents the country, and that country has respect for human rights, and it has.
Yeah, just quickly, even I think you can be democratically elected war criminal. I just don't think.
No, I'm with you.
Yeah,
but this is but that's why I followed it with. But you can be a democratically elected war criminal, but I don't think most of those that you're worried about actually respect human rights. I don't think they have their own internal judicial system, which is independent. And gosh, everybody knows that Netanyahu and his judicial system do not get along. So there are internal checks and balances within Israel to adjudicate these kinds of things. And I would say further for NATO, let's remember Turkey is a member of NATO, and they are as close to being anti-American as possible, and they are extremely anti-Israel right now. They are anti-Semitic. They are happy about it. They are proud. Erdogan is on a rampage, and it is a disaster. And it's actually shameful that they're part of NATO. My point is that you have to go and look at these institutions. Most bureaucracies are like cancers. They become self-perpetuating, and they forget what their original goal was to do. And by the way, the American government bureaucracy exploding is another example of that. I mean, it's just out of control. We got to try to rein in the American bureaucracy, but more importantly, we have to look at all of these. That's why the UN is in such bad shape, because we all love the name United Nations. It sounds good. It's touchy-feely. And we don't look at what they do anymore with an objective lens. And the same thing with the International Criminal Court. What are they worried about on this planet? It's the same as the UN. There are more sanctions against Israel than against any other country at the UN, when it has one of the best human rights records in the world. How is that possible? It's possible when the institution's corrupt. So I think it would be great if we slammed the ICC. I think it would be great Trump went up against Merkel at NATO and said, if you don't start paying your way, we're going to pull out. And, Merkel hated him, so she bought gas from the Russians. We know who had the last laugh on that one. We need to look at these institutions, and we need to be critical. And for all the money that's flowing, the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars that flow out to them, especially American dollars, what are we doing and what are we getting? I would love to see it.
Anders?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I mean, again, the standard here should be the self-interest of America, individual Americans. And when it comes to the UN, for the International Criminal Court, I mean, it's a joke. If you look at, I just looked up the map on the wiki page, which countries that are members and signatories and not signatories. It seems like the US used to be a signatory, but subsequently have withdrawn it. So that's a joke. When it comes to NATO, definitely put more pressure on all the states involved to pay their fair share. And I think personally that NATO should be, it's an organization. I mean, in terms of American self-interest, I think you can make a case for defense alliances. but it would be based on, and we're nowhere near this, but but it would be based on American values, and American that these countries would subscribe to taking their countries in a certain direction politically and militarily, that is in the interest of the United States of America. That would be, if they're kind of welfare states, that they get on a path to becoming more free market, more capitalist, more individual, protecting of individual rights, and so on and so forth. So that's what you would do in the defense area. Now, when it comes to the UN, I definitely think the US should leave the UN overnight. And then, there are some things that UN is doing that may be worthwhile, but it would be up to you and me, here in the US at least, to put our money where our mouths are. And if we like what the World Wildlife Fund or whatever, or the UN's Children's Organization, if they're doing good work, well, support them with your money. And the UN organizations, they would compete for our charity dollars with every other charitable organization in this country and abroad.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly to say something about Turkey, the fact that it's, you had Turkey actually having Hamas members in its country and training Hamas, soldiers basically, and Hamas has kidnapped and killed American citizens. The fact that this is, and this hasn't been like an accident or something that you could say, well, while really bad, it's unfortunate. It's something that Turkey is directly trying to do. It's directly harming American interest and NATO interest. They really have no place. When they first came in, it was pragmatic to just have something really close against the Soviet Union, and the same pragmatic goal probably applies there, still here. Russia is still close. Having Turkey there is something good, but it's, you cannot sacrifice basically your values based on just some pragmatic goal as having Turkey, especially when it completely undermines the whole system. Not even talking about how Turkey tried to block the entry of a few of new nations, of Sweden and Finland, I think specifically. So they are completely on the opposite side of aligned interests. We have a super chat from Jeff. Thank you so much. And also super chat from Frank. Thank you so much. He says, Jill Stein, every other word she says is genocide. We've talked about Jill Stein, I believe, last week. Surprising thing about Jill Stein, because she came out so strongly against genocide, in Dearborn, Michigan, she actually gotten more votes than Kamala Harris. I think Trump got something over 50%, and Jill Stein got like 35%. So that was pretty interesting to see, to say the least. But overall, it was really funny because I think I haven't seen the most recent stats, but Robert Kennedy has actually gotten more votes than Jill Stein the last time I checked, which is also really funny. You are not even running and you still get more than this third party is pretty funny to see. But Michael, where can people find you?
Kaufman with 2 Fs, Michael on LinkedIn.
Anders, where can people find you?
andersingemarson.substack.com.
And you could find me on my YouTube channel, Damn Dan. Thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of The Daily Objective and The Reality Show. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.